What is your best story? You know, the kind of story that you might tell if you wanted to impress people at a dinner party. Maybe it's something incredible that you've seen, or something amazing that you've achieved. Me, I've got two really good stories. And the first one is a lot easier for me to tell than the second. So my first really good story takes place in that hot, sticky summer of 2020. Do you remember? It was July, and with the support of my incredible family, I delivered our third baby in the spare bedroom of our house, because there were no midwives available to attend the birth. It's a good story, isn't it? I love to tell it, and people usually like to hear it. It's got drama, it's got suspense, and if you've met my 5-year-old, you'll know that it's got a very happy ending. But that story is not the focus of my talk today. You see, my second really good story is the kind of story that when I start to tell it, people's faces freeze. And they don't know where to look. Because my second really good story is about the day that my sister died. Now, this story, of course, doesn't have a traditional happy ending. But the day that my sister died is etched into my memory as one of the most beautiful and tragic experiences of my entire life. And I would go as far as to say that it's made me who I am today. Over the course of 7 years, I experienced the loss of my sister, and then my grandma, and then my dad. And all through that time, I was starting my own family, having my first, and my second, and then my third child. And what I noticed was an undeniable parallel, a similarity to the quality of time that surrounds both birth and death. Because when we really think about it, what else is actually real in life other than birth and death? The homes we live in, the jobs we do, the identities we hold, these are all subjective, transient, invented even. And yet birth and death are these universal human experiences, timeless. They've been around forever, and they will undoubtedly impact us all. So why is it then that we are so ready to share our stories about birth, no matter how joyful or dramatic? And yet when it comes to talking about death, we find it so difficult. Let's pause for a minute. Let me ask you a question. What stories do you hold about death? What were you told as a child? How might you talk to the children in your life about it now? In the days that followed my sister's death, we watched my nieces, then aged 2 and 5, point up out the window at a pink-streaked sunset sky, and they said, "Mummy, Mummy is up there." It brought tears to our eyes, but it warmed our hearts to see them beginning to make sense of things in their own way. Perhaps this was the first step on their path towards healing, we thought. But we were wrong. The charity that supported my family through this time would go on to tell us that we needed to be more specific. that my nieces, as young as they were, needed a story that was clear and true and honest. As a culture, we talk about death in this kind of woolly, mysterious sort of way. We speak about somebody passing away, being no longer with us. We talk of losing someone. These words, death, dying, dead, they get stuck in our throats. But why? My sister wasn't lost. I knew exactly where she was. And her children deserve to know the same. Because when we are able to make a story from something difficult or distressing that has happened to us, something quite remarkable happens in our brains. In the chaos, the turmoil of grief, a story can bring order to chaos. And this isn't just my experience. This is science. The American neuroscientist Dr. Dan Siegel explains to us how putting events in order facilitates something in the brain called bilateral integration. And what this means is that the left side of our brain, which loves logic, order, and reason, can connect with the right side of our brain, which is all about emotion, intuition, deep feelings. Telling the story bridges the gap. And this helps us to understand why a story can bring a sense of calm to what can only otherwise be described as an emotional thunderstorm. And this is what my nieces needed. An anchor in their storm. A sequence of events that they could revisit throughout their lives as and when they needed to. Starting with the very basic and simple truths. Because if we don't have a story, we will tend to make one up. I was about 11 when my granddad died, and one of my strongest and fondest memories from the time is my youngest cousin dropping casually into conversation. Yeah, because Daddy drove Granddad to heaven in the back of his car. I smile now when I tell this story because my cousin is of course all grown up and has a much clearer idea of what happens to us at the end of life. But at that time, that was the very best conclusion that they could draw with the information that they had been given. As adults, we skirt around the truth of death and dying because we find it awkward and uncomfortable. But it is precisely because we don't talk about it enough that we find it so very difficult. When I returned to work after my compassionate leave, I was desperate to reconnect with my colleagues and share this life-changing experience that I had just been through. But instead, I was met with what I would describe as a kind of sympathetic hesitance. I was held at a distance, people watching me cautiously, poised with a tissue in case I should burst into tears. It must have been awful. I can't imagine what your family are going through. I am so sorry for your loss. Everyone was so incredibly kind to me, wonderfully kind, but their words just didn't land. They couldn't match the enormity of my experience. I felt like I was in a bubble. You see, I hadn't lost my sister. I was altered, but I was not less. Yes, she had died, but my relationship with her was far from over. It had simply changed beyond all recognition. My sister left this earthly realm surrounded by a circle of people who loved her so dearly. She did not want to die. She was far too young. She had been in a lot of pain. And we were all completely heartbroken. And yet, in that hospital room, we were transported. We laughed, we cried, was praying, singing, we held hands, we hugged each other. And when she drew her last breath, there was this moment when time stood completely still. Perfect peace, pure connection. There is a unique kind of magic in stories that come from the very edges of life. They serve to connect us with something much greater than ourselves. They remind us of the precious and fragile nature of life. They invite us to live with more meaning. When a baby is born, when somebody dies, we're reminded of what truly matters, because everything else just falls away. Isn't this wisdom that we all deserve to share in? So that is what I did. I started to share my story. Just to friends at first, and then more and more people as my courage grew. And then something amazing happened. People began to seek me out so that they could share their stories too. Whispered conversation in the corner of a party, Facebook message from a friend I hadn't seen in years. Everywhere it seemed, people were desperate to burst out of their bubbles and share what they'd been through. Bringing our stories into the light allows us to be fully seen. It lets us say, this really happened and it has changed me forever. There is a deep connection, a shared, if perhaps unwanted, understanding between those of us who have seen death. And when you tap into that circle, it doesn't take the pain away. But all of a sudden, you are just a little bit less alone. We fear death because it is unknown, but it remains unknown because we don't talk about it enough. We can become so lonely in our grief, and yet death is the one thing that will eventually impact us all. We are living in increasingly dangerously divided times. Messages everywhere about what separates us from each other, what makes us different other. So now, more than ever, we need to be reminded of our shared humanity. Experiences, the rites of passage that connect us all. And that is why, passionately, wholeheartedly, I believe we need to start sharing our stories about death.